used to knowing that Chidera, the name Chidera is for female, right? So that's how I was taken aback. Nice to have you here. And Isaiah, how are you? You're pushing. Nice to have you here, Isaiah. Ugo Chinyere, how are you? Good evening. All right, guys. So, this our session is being recorded. So, yeah. Oh, so we have David here. David, hello, David. Good evening. Good, good, good. All right, so I'm going to share my screen now so we can get to it. Um, just a minute. Mm. Just give me a minute, guys. All right. All right. Let me know if you can see my screen. Can you see what is on my screen?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. All right. Super cool. All right. So, design thinking. When you see the word design thinking, what comes to your mind? How would you explain what this phrase mean? I want someone to tell me. Um, let's see, who should I call? Yeah, let me call Chidera. Chidera, so when you see this word design thinking, how do you understand it to mean?
Well, I would say design thinking is, from what I can understand, is where you look at a problem and you try to see how you can solve it through multiple processes or systems and find a solution
Hmm,
while keeping the end user in mind.
awesome. That's cool. Does anyone else wants to try? Ozioma.
Not so far from what he has said. I think design thinking has to do with you um, analyzing a problem and just to get a result or a solution.
Hmm. All right, that's cool. So, just let's move forward from there. So, it's important to know that design thinking, yeah, just like you guys have said, a way or a certain series of processes or steps you take to find a problem, then figure out a solution to solving that problem and all that plenty grammar. But then at the end of the day, design thinking is not the only way to solving problems. It's just one of the many ways, one of the many principles, or we call them processes. So there are different processes in the design world that we employ to creating solutions. Okay, so design thinking is just one of them. We have Google Design Sprints, which if some of you are taking the Google UX course, you is what you will learn. In fact, the large chunk of your learning experience in the Google UX design course on Coursera is what you will be learning. You'll learn a lot about the Google Design Sprints. And the Google Design Sprints are pretty much like a multiple of other processes that already exist, and then they they put it together and try to simplify it to churn out solutions faster. Then there is also double diamond. Double diamond is another design process that so double diamond is pretty much discover, define, design, deploy. That's just what that is. Double diamond. Then there is the five elements. uh is it five something, there are lots of them like that. So design thinking is just the most common or the most frequently used processes, most frequently used process in the design world. So That's one of the reasons why we are actually taking it in this session. If you, for example, if you're probably taking a design course at Career Foundry or Nelson Norman Group, they will actually take you through the five most common design processes, and you learn other types aside design thinking. But for this, our class will be focusing only on design thinking because it's the most frequently used in almost every company, whether you're a designer or you're even a non-designer, whether you're an engineer, you're an architect, everybody use design thinking. So we've already done this. We've gotten to know each other, at least by our names. So what is design thinking? Now, to make things like a bit easier for us to assimilate, I decided to divide it into two categories: design thinking as an analogy and design thinking as processes. So design thinking as an analogy, I be ideology, sorry, I said analogy. Design thinking as an ideology states that in order to come up with an innovative solution, like a really innovative, creative, impactful solution, one must be able to adapt a designer's mindset and approach the problem from user's perspective. Just like Chidera said, putting the end user in mind. Like the user is the center of every single thing you're trying to do in order to, come up with that innovative solution at the back of your head. So that is the ideology behind design thinking. So, and then as a process is pretty much talking about the steps, like building empathy with your user. You're almost always in communication with this user, and then coming up with ideas, then turning those ideas to tangible products that you can test. They're either products or services, right? Tangible products or services that you can test as quickly as possible and get it into the market. So that's what that is. Now, that just like I mentioned earlier, that whether you're a designer, you're a non-designer, you would be faced with you would actually realize that you get to apply design thinking process. As even construction people, architects apply design thinking process. So yeah, I'm saying that design thinking is not only it's not for only design related problems. In fact, it was originally designed, or it was originally created by in a way to help engineers approach problems creatively, and in a way to help engineers come up with solutions that users can use. I mean, what's the point of figuring out how to solve a problem for a user, and at the end of the day they can't use it? A lot of engineers, I think that's what has actually influenced the way the manufacturing of cars have evolved over time. If you are a fan of cars, you see how the manufacturing and the design of cars has evolved over time. In the olden days, in fact, you have to be very technical to know how to use cars in the olden days. So nowadays, anybody can actually up in and drive a car. You don't have to start thinking about how the gear works. But back in the days, you actually need to even know how the gear works so that you know the exact timing to shift your gear. It was that bad. So they had to come up with a model called this design thinking to help engineers learn how to approach problems creatively, just like how designers do. So we as designers, we actually think about our users before, when, and even after we have designed our solution. So what are the four principles here um, in this design thinking process? Please give me a minute. Something is pouring in my kitchen. Please, in a minute. I hope you guys are following me because I'm going to actually ask questions. I always ask questions. Ask as I ask. I will know. You tell me. So the four principles of design thinking. It must be human centered, right? That's the number one. In fact, that's the number one rule of the a design thinking process. You always have to put your user, the human being, at the perspective of the problem you're trying to solve. They are the ones facing the issue. It is them that they know where the shoe hurts, right? So they are the ones that would clearly paint the picture of what their frustrations really are. So the first rule or the first principle of the design thinking process is the human being is at the center of how you solve your problems. And the second principle is the ambiguity rule, meaning pretty much so thinking outside of the box. Don't try to control how you solve the problem. Now, this is what I mean. Like there are people who like they think they know the most suitable solution to a problem. Like they just assume. So, for let me give an example. So, you feel like there's a problem with uh, people supplying pure water, right? You that's what you think because maybe you personally find it difficult getting pure water. But then you not get into the world of the world out there. Who's just joining this call? That's interesting. Hello, good evening. I just noticed you're just joining us. UI Sphere, right? I don't know why it's not responding. Hello, can you hear me? UI Sphere, are you part of this class or we should just ignore you and continue what we're doing? All right. So we'll go ignore him or her. So yes, the ambiguity rule says that think outside of the box and give up the need to control a problem altogether. So I was using an analogy of the pure water problem, right? So you feel that there's an issue with easy access to getting pure water, but that's you. Okay, so you're just assuming there's a problem because you have that problem with getting access to water, and then so you go around and you figure out if other people also having similar problems, right? But then you realize that, well, not everybody has issues getting pure water, right? Who is this,
Hmm.
please? Please mute your mic. Thank you. So, um, and then you realize that okay, so not everybody is really having that same problem. But then because you are like you have more you've placed more priority on your assumption that there is a problem than realizing that well it's not necessarily a problem. Maybe you're looking in the wrong direction. You probably need to look elsewhere. Maybe you need to ask the right questions and all of that. You need to be probably realize that the issue might not really be about the access to pure water, or maybe it's about the access to hygienic, as in clean, healthy water, or something like that. But then you are just trying to control that, well, you feel this is the problem, and then this is the problem you want to solve, right? So it's the ambiguity really saying that you shouldn't control the problem, all right? Think out of the box. If there are new information that comes on into the light and then makes you like that gives you more insight into what you thought was there, but maybe it was not there, or be something new that was there. Let that problem lead you on. Let that insight lead you on to finding out more things about what you thought was there. Like think outside of the box. Be a problem finder. As in, how did they even used to say this? Like, let it lead you to finding the most suitable solution. It's not only you are designing for, right? You are not designing, you're not the only one that will end up using the product or the service you're going to design. So that ability really is saying think outside of the box and give up the need to control that problem. All right. So the third rule is the rule of redesign. Iteration is like the mother of design thinking process. Iteration is like the mother of design thinking. In fact, it's like if you are not iterating your design, if your design is not iterative, let me put it that way, then you are doing something wrong. So pretty much what this is you are seeing what has been done previously to address human needs, and then you are not looking at better ways okay, to meet the needs in the future, in tomorrow, in the next 1 week, in the next 2 weeks, in the next 1 month, in the next 6 months, in the next 1 year, in the next 3 years, in the next 5 years. Okay, you are iterating, you are iterating. Okay, this is how it was done before. Oh, there are better ways to either improve on the processes or improve on the design or improve on the experience. You will always iterate, and this comes about when you work hand in hand with your users' feedback. You keep testing, you go back, you keep testing, you go back to your design, or you go back to your research, you go back to your initial approach, and you work on it, make your design or your solution even better, or even come about better solutions to problems. Even if the problems are kind of evolved, like maybe now give birth to a new variant of the problem, just like how COVID-19 did. You go back again to your research, go back to what you've done initially, or even look at what has been done previously. Even if it's not you, like maybe other teams or people from the 70s, from the 80s, how did they solve this problem? Then look at better ways, look at different ways to actually like improve on it for the future. So that is it. The redesign rule is always there, always there. Then there's the tangibility rule. Just like I mentioned, you don't just stop at the idea. You take the idea and you make it into something that's tangible. Okay, something that people can interact with, experiment with, and then you are open to receiving creative criticism to gain insight into how that product can meet people's needs, or even into how that product is meeting the needs of the humans. So I hope so far so good. We understand to this point what this design thinking process is really about. Does anyone have questions? Do you have questions?
I don't have any questions for now.
Right. Okay. So moving on. So we're going to talk about the stages of design thinking. Um, so the National group recently explored, as at is it last year or 2 years ago, we used to still talk about the 5 stages. But as at this year, I think most recently, they explored the processes again and made it more defined. So I won't be talking about the 5 stages or the 5 processes in design thinking. I'll be talking about the 3 phases. So we have the understand phase, the explore phase, and the materialize phase. In the understand phase, we have two things going on there. You want to be able to understand your user and then understand their problem. So that is understand your user is where you empathize with them. Okay, understand where they currently are, what their experience is like, and all that things. And then you now want to understand the problem. So understanding the problem now helps you define what problem you have the capacity to solve, because it's not all the problem of human beings that you can solve. Even as tiny as traffic issues, by the time you start asking 1,000 people in a particular area what is their experience with traffic, you probably have like 10 different problems. And then at the end of the day, by the time you are trying to understand the problem and defining for yourself what are the problems you can solve, then you discover that maybe it's just one or two problems that you actually have the capacity to solve. All right. So understand phase is where you empathize with your user and then define their problems, and then define the problems that you now understood they are experiencing and the ones you can solve. All right. So then the explore phase is where you then think of many ways to solve that problem. Okay, so you've defined the problem, what the problem is. Okay, and at the defined stage is where you come up with your problem statement. A problem statement simply is a simple sentence that describes what the issue is, what your user is facing, and how it's affecting the economy as individuals and as organizations, right? So that's what your problem statement will carry. And usually your problem statement can come with statistics that shows that, oh, this is the depth of the problem. So at empathize stage, you are carrying out your research. You want to understand your user, you're interviewing them, you're doing online surveys up and down, you're doing face to face, you're doing group observation on all of those things, right? While in define phase, you are defining what the problem really is by writing a problem statement. You are putting all your research together, right? And then I think this is what the problem really is. This is how deep the problem is. This is how much of a problem it really is and why it should be solved, right? And then the explore phase is where you then start thinking of there's in the explore phase, sorry, in the explore phase, there are two things that will be going on there. You ideate and you prototype. What this really means is at the ideate stage, what you're doing is coming up with as many ideas as possible that are potential solution to your problem, to the problem you're trying to solve. And at this phase, you have to think out of the box. Like you can't restrict. Come up with as many as possible. Keep writing them down. And then you now start evaluating which one is the closest to, which one is the most appropriate, which one is the most suitable to that problem you're trying to solve. And then once you're able to evaluate the most suitable solution, then you go to your prototype. Prototype is now when you bring that solution into visuals, into something that can be touched and felt, or a service that you're designing that can be experienced, right? Or a product that you design that can be touched, felt, interact, can be interacted with, or a service that people can experience. Maybe it's a logistics service, maybe it's a transportation service, and things like that. And then you now get to the materialized phase. This is the materialized phase is where you then take your prototype, all right, what you have already designed, is still in Figma, for example, or in Adobe XD. You now take it to your users again. You go back to your users and test that this product or this service you have designed, you've created, is solving their problem. So at the test phase, what you're doing is you're trying to get their feedback. You are open to criticism, all forms, although you are open that it's creative criticism that you get. But then as human beings are emotional, right? So you will get a mixture of constructive and destructive criticism. But you are the ones that know the goal you're trying to achieve, right? So you look out for them creative criticism and the feedback you get from your user. Okay, like you see all these arrows going back and back. The feedback you get from your user, you take it back to your prototype. All right. When you get past your prototype, you see, okay, oh, this is not looking like something that is going to solve the user problem. You go back to your idea, you go back to your to the user again, right? And then keep engaging with the user, keep engaging with you until you get to the most suited solution. Now, it's very important to note that it's not every feedback that has business sense. Okay, as a designer, you need to have that at the back of your mind so that you're not always at friction with your stakeholders because you're not the one that's going to put in the money to launch, that is, implement the product. So once you get feedback from all of your users, you also want to consider the business sense behind it and how practical it is as well. Okay, so those are the things you consider in through all these processes. So once you're done with your text phase and you are sure that your product is launch ready, there's something called launch ready, right? It fulfills all requirements and all of those many things that stakeholders used to consider, like the business sense of it and all of that. Once your product is or service is launch ready, then you implement. Now, even while you implement, you are still receiving feedback, you are still receiving engagement from your users, right? So back to the users again. So you can see how through all these stages and the phases, we are always interfacing with our users. We are always in communication with our user, right? At this phase, at this phase, at this phase, and at this phase, you are always communicating with your user. Do we all understand this part?
Yes, ma.
All right, cool. Is it only today that is understanding? It's only today that I'm hearing yes from. Oh, okay. All right, so let's move on. All right, so just explains again what I've been trying to break down into tiny bits. So from empathize, you're conducting research, like I mentioned earlier, to develop an understanding of your users. And then in define, you combine all your research and observe where your users' problems really exist, right? It's not all the problems pretty much. And then when you ideate, what you're doing is you're generating a range of crazy creative ideas. And then you prototype because at this point you're what you're doing is you're building real tac- tactile representations. Oh, my glasses are going. Representations of a range of ideas. All right, so that's the prototype phase, and then you test. You go back to your user to get feedback from them. That's what that testing means. So, with the feedback you use to improve on your product or your service, and then you put it to effect. That's what it means by implement. You officially launch your product or your service. So, moving on, I think I've really explained all these parts. Yeah, conduct session as a develop function, build the session, blah blah. So I think you understand this part already. So let's get to research methods. So you remember, like I mentioned earlier, in the empathize stage, you are conducting research, right? To understand your users. So when you're conducting research, there are different methods. There are two major methods of research. We have the primary research and we have the secondary research. So with the primary research, you are pretty much the one directly going into getting the data you need. All right, the information you need. So primary research is a type of research design in which the researcher gathers relevant data samples directly instead of depending on already existing data. Now, how examples of primary research we I think some of us are already familiar with is the interviews, the surveys, online surveys, focus groups or observations. And I think there was a class I was explaining this to earlier where last week where I was telling them that you can actually, as a designer, develop an inbuilt habit to be a researcher by default. Like you are always observing things around you and you're noting, okay, this is happening here, this is happening here, and you're curious and stuff like that. So this kind of helps you gather information. Basically, I'm just saying by the side, as a side note, as a designer, it's a cool thing to have. So primary research, yeah. Then secondary research is you're munching on existing data. All right, and existing data come in form of research reports. I personally do love working with things like news, things like vetted news, or not just any that's verified news, um, articles written by scholars, or research reports by different institutions, like maybe the WHO and UNICEF and things like that. Then research reports written by academias. So those this kind of documents are where you get like data from and then use it to understand your target or your user. So for example, if you are looking at trying to get information about hospital management system in Nigeria. Okay, you want to go online and search for what information exists about hospital management system in Nigeria. What are the issues facing hospital management systems? Now, are there any existing hospital management system? And those are the information you want. So when you're starting your research, you want to have a goal in mind. There's something called research plan. So in that your research plan, you're listing out what's your goal, what are the things you are looking to achieve with your research, what are the questions you are looking to have answered. So that is all that you do here. Now, in by the time you start collecting your research responses from your users, especially maybe you are interviewing them or you are reading about them on a blog post, maybe people are doing reviews about people that are living in Makoko in Lagos and how they feel about living in Makoko and things like that. You want to understand what they say, you want to understand what they think, you want to understand what they do, you want to understand how they feel. There's something called the empathy map. So we designers during our research processes, we use the empathy map to have like a pictorial understanding of how what our users say, what they think, what they do in the current circumstance they find themselves in, what are their behavioral patterns, right? And how do they feel? What is their emotions that they project? What are the emotions that they are subjected to feeling and things like that. So this empathy map helps you to like really organize your the responses you get from them. And with the empathy map, you use to create what we call user personas. Now, what are user personas? Um, you really can't get to know all of your users at once. You're going to kill yourself. It's actually an impossible task and it's a lot of money. It's going to cost you a lot of money to do an extensive research to be able to have like get the big picture of what it is that your user is feeling and all those things. So you can really understand what is really going on in the community, what's really going on in the demography and things like that. So, what we user personas, we're able to find a way to categorize larger group of users into like fictional characters. So user personas are archetypical users, like they are fictional characters whose goals and characteristics represent the needs of a larger group of users. So for example, you're working on an hospital management system application. Now, how many hospitals can you go and do observation in? How many hospitals in the whole of Nigeria? You can't. So maybe you are in Lagos and you just pick two hospitals on the island, two hospitals on the mainland, then you do your observations and you get different kinds of feedback, different kind of responses, different kinds of emotions from both the patients and the medics are the doctors, the clinicians, the medical, all of sort of medical practitioners, and also the management of the hospitals. So in this particular scenario, as a designer trying to find a solution to hospital management issues in Nigeria, you have three categories of users. We have the patients, you have the medical practitioners, and we have the management of the hospitals, right? So you then come up with user personas that will represent your patients. Now, representing your patients, you can have like different categories of patients. Probably can have a patient that is a senior citizen, a patient that is middle class, like middle aged, and is a low income earner, a patient that is a child or a young adult. So you want to have user personas that represent this group of people, right? So that's almost like four personas I've counted already. And then you create a fictional identity for them. Now, in a most realistic way, I usually would advise that the responses you get from this certain group of people is what you use to build the information about your user persona. So, for example, if you have interviewed a young adult who is a patient in an hospital, is the information you got to know about that young adult you probably will put in the user persona that is representing a group of young adults in the hospitals all over Nigeria, something like that. So that's how user and the reason why I'm really taking my time to really explain user personas is because it's very, very important. User personas gives perspectives, like put a lot of things into perspective for the stakeholders, for you as a designer, for the developers, and for everybody else that is part of your product team. Even the digital marketing people would need this user persona so that they know who they are talking to. By the time they are posting captions on social media, they know who their target audience are. So user personas is very very important in your design process. So you can't just joke with it. Even when you are discussing with other members of the team, it's a rule of thumb not to say, oh, this user. Mm-mm. For example, if you have created a user persona called Jennifer, and Jennifer is the young adult that is a patient in Cedar Care Hospital, you will want to use Jennifer. And so everybody in the team knows that when you use Jennifer for a particular scenario, they know who Jennifer is and what problems Jennifer has, what features or what solution you are looking to solve or provide for Jennifer. So that's how this user persona works. Does anyone have something to say? Okay, Chidera, yes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Um, so let's say you find yourself in an opportunity where the stakeholders of the company you want to work for are targeting a very, very small demographic. Let's say professionals in a very niche field that maybe nobody has ever heard of. And you can't really find user personas among the small amount of data sets of them. What do you do?
Okay, so the fact that you already have a user, that is already a user persona. So like your question said, you're working with a small group and it's just probably one user, right? Then you create a user persona for that particular user. Now, if you really want to look at it again, that particular group of people, the small group of people you are looking to cater for, have different lives. So they can be somebody who is let me think of a small group. Mm. Okay, so for events, maybe you are looking to design a solution for to help optimize event management. Now, in event management, you're probably just your primary user is probably just your event manager. Now, as an event manager has different lives. Like an event manager can either be doing event management as a side also, can either be doing event management as a full time career, and somebody can be doing event management just because it was handed down to him or her as a family business. So even with you having one user that you are catering for, user persona still come to play because um yeah, user persona still comes to play. There's something else that was on my mind I wanted to say. So when you are not designing user persona for such user, you are creating maybe like three different personas that represent someone, an event planner that is doing it as a side also, or an event planner that is um that is doing it as a full-time career, and an event planner that simply does not have experience but was hands down to him or her as a family business. So yeah, you can't just solve for one group of people because those group of people actually have different lives. That's what I'm trying to explain. So yes, user persona does still applies to such situation. Does that answer your question? Does that answer your question,
Yes, it
Chidera?
does. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, you're welcome. So does anyone have any other questions so we can move forward? I want to show you guys out other things. Then we'll call it a night. I think we're actually almost done. Oh, yeah. Okay, so in creating user persona, there's a template we'll work with. So I actually got this template because it's more comprehensive. You can actually work with a lesser what's the word, a template with lesser information. But this is like the best way to actually deal with like understanding your user. Sorry, excuse me. Now in this particular persona, we have the demography of your user here, represented by Jennifer, for example. If I can increase it. Okay, so represented by Jennifer. Jennifer is 32. She's so for this particular scenario, we are designing maybe an app for a project manager. So this person is a finance project manager. She's single. She lives in Austin, Texas. That is pretty much like a semi-city, semi-suburb environment. Now, what's her interest? Obviously, because she's in a semi-city, semi-suburb environment, she would like cycling. She would like kayaking at a lake and things like that. She like going for shows. She like having dinners with her friends. She like volunteering at the farm, as I say farm, local animal shelter. So, in your persona, You are looking to understand your user interest. You are looking to understand your user goals. What are their frustrations? That's what are their pain points. Then what motivates them? What challenges them? Now, this challenge is different from frustration. This is what frustrates them. What's the pain points like what pinches them? Like what is the frustration that they experience? And that what challenges them is what propels them to or like in Jennifer's case, increase revenue fast, right? That's the challenges that they face. They want to increase their revenue, they want to increase sales of the team, they want to but then they are also faced with delays and slow communication. Some same with what they are considering as their frustration. So challenges might be different from frustration. That's what I was trying to explain here. All right. So motivation, challenges, what are their expectations? What do they need? What do they expect to work for them? So, for example, in this case, probably they interview Jennifer, and Jennifer is like, "Oh, I think for me to be more effective, I need to have a Slack integration. I need to have a all-in-one project management tool that has clear due dates for projects. I need to work with Gantt charts, things like so. These are what they need, what they expect to have. Then what technology or system or what technology do they interact with? This is very important. In fact, your developers would need to understand this. Even you as a person will need to understand this so that you know, are you designing for iOS devices? Are you designing for responsiveness? Because you can see what your users are interacting with. Okay, if you are designing a solution that for a set of users that always are on their mobile phones, that are always on social media and things like that, then what are their preferences? Where do they get information from? That's what this means. Content type preferences. Where do they seek? Where do they go to seek information from? Do people mostly just do they just go to Google search and just type something and it come up? What books? What maybe do they are the type that read newspapers and things like that? You want to know that about your user. Then what brands influences them? What are the brands or social networks that influences them? Or the different things, okay, brands and influences. So yeah, you can see for Jennifer, Slack is number one for her because well, that's probably where she mostly works. And then she uses Google, she's Apple and things. So these like a template. I would provide this slide and also the template so you guys can come around, and work with it, add it to your learnings and things like that. So also, I'm going to share some articles to some other things that you can read further about on design thinking process. Read more about design thinking process and how you can actually. That is very important that as you can see, like these arrows shows that it's a continuous process. Okay, it is not a after this you do this. It's like you can be here in your prototype and you realize you need an information. You probably like having a roadblock somewhere here. You can always go back to your user. You can always go back to the problem. Maybe you missed out something along the way. So it's a continuous process and you will always iterate. Even when you have launched, you always go back to your user, go back again. That's why you notice in some of the apps we use, in fact, I think it's all of the apps we use, you always get notification for an update. That's because these guys, these designers and developers are working every single time, receiving our feedbacks to improve on our experience. Okay, so the feedback they get from us, they go back and improve on it, update again, go back, improve on it, update again. So you guys should go further, read more about design thinking, read more about how to do your research. In fact, research is like the most important part of design thinking process because it's the information, is how you are able to interpret your user problems that will give you a lead way in how you're solving that problem. So it's very important. Then also, like I have emphasized over and over again, the user personas is key. In fact, it doesn't. Let's even scrap out this information on larger group. Okay, as long as you have users as the centerpiece of your chessboard, as the center of attraction in the decisions that is being made in your company, you have to make your stakeholders understand that you are working with your personas. You can't always go back to Yarisi every time to ask her for questions. All the information you've gotten from them is what you use to build either is one or two user personas, and that would help guide what design decisions you'll be making along the way. So that's very important. I think I'm done with everything we have meant to do today. Does anybody have questions? Okay, so in the absence of questions, I don't know if I'm permitted to give an assignment. I totally forgot that. Let me check. I'm supposed to give you guys an assignment. Please just give me a minute, guys. Let me go and read where this thing is. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and give you guys a task. Um, so this is in line with what you're doing here at the boot camp. So, and don't worry, the tax will not kill you. You guys will survive. You'll survive. All right. So, very important. I want you guys to. All right. So this is the assignment. Uh, you know what? I will explain the assignment here. Then I will send it to you guys on your WhatsApp group. So the assignment is simply this: look around you and discover a problem, maybe something that you'll be super curious about. Okay, and then come up with as many um, ways you yourself you would have considered solving that problem. Then you can then try your hands on the secondary research method. These as individuals. If it was a team, then I would say you should do primary research so that as a team you come together, you interview a select group of people and things like that. But as individuals, read up about that problem you have identified, right? So if it's a problem about um, it's a problem about committing children to school, for example. Okay, read up about it. What are the concerns that parents have? What are the issues that schools are having? Things like that. So think of a problem, read about the problem online, search about it, collate all your research. It's important. Open a Google Doc file and then collate all these your resources together and then do like short notes about them, what you learn about what this problem is, about what these guys are saying, what these people here are saying, and things like that. Put it together. Then, with the information you've gathered, try to create a user persona. All right. So that's really just what that assignment is. I just want to give a task that would help you guys to learn how to build user personas. So in this case, you're building user personas with secondary data. That's going through the secondary research methods. You're building user personas from existing data. So I'm going to send the assignment and also the slides of our class to you guys on WhatsApp. So thank you guys for having me.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much, Miss Victoria.
For getting the references, can we use Notion instead of Google Docs?
Oh yes, yes, yes. Since you guys are already using Notion, awesome. Yes, please. So use Notion, then build your user persona using Figma. I don't know. Oh, wait though. Hold on. Let me check something. I know if you guys have not been taught how to use Figma yet. Okay, let's take it step by step. Yeah, compile or okay. First of all, identify the problem. Like so, you state it out there. What the problem is that you've identified, and that you're researching into. Have that documented in your Notion, and then you then embed the resources that you are working with from where you got your information. Then you take notes, right? You jot down notes about okay, this is how you understand the user problems, and you use that to build your persona. So maybe building of your persona could be done after you guys have learned how to use Figma because it's with Figma you use to design the template, and then but for now you can actually provide all the information. Like let me share my screen so you guys can see that. Like the information about their interests, their goals. So you can actually take note of them. So you can jot them down. And so by the time you learn how to use Figma, you can then design this template and then just paste your notes inside all of these boxes. So I hope I've been able to explain what the assignment is about very clearly.
Yes, thank you.
All right then. All right then. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.
All right, thank you. Bye.